Hey everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is your Right Angle Lightning Round. And what makes this a lightning round instead of a regular right angle? Well, instead of a deep dive into one topic, I snag headlines seemingly at random, but actually with more than a little sadism in mind. And I inflict these headlines for their comments on Bill and Scott, and they have no idea what stories I've selected just for them. But just to keep things fair, I also inflict one of these headlines on me, and I don't know what it is.
I don't think that's true.
No, I know exactly what story.
Bill and I have been backstage in the soundproof booth while you were preparing this.
That's right, under the cone of silence.
That's right.
Bill Whittle Industries had professionally installed at our office spaces just for these moments. Without further ado, let's dive in. Bill, we're going to start with you this week. 6 B-52 strategic bombers fly alongside Norwegian fighters in a clear signal to Russia. And I got to tell you what got me excited about the story, because I think it's one of those details that not a whole lot of people know. 6 B-52s is almost 10% of the entire inventory. We only have 75 or 76 of these planes. And of course, they're not all ready to fly at the same time. So just the sheer number of B-52s, isn't that the message here?
I think the message is, here's 9% of the total bombers that we have that were built in the 1950s. We also have some bombers that were built in the late 80s, and we also have a bomber that was built pretty much through the 90s and the 2000s. So don't get saucy with us. And that's really it. You know, I did when I was talking about American exceptionalism, and this wasn't too long ago either, and basically making the case that the reason that that Europe has all of their socialist benefits is because they don't have to pay for defense, and the reason they don't pay for defense is because those capitalist American cowboys are paying for their defense. And so I took a look at the total number of forces that Sweden has in terms of their military versus what Russia has, not in all of Russia, just stationed across the Baltic. And it's a bit lopsided. Vladimir Putin is a dangerous guy because he's a speculator, and he doesn't have any respect for this country and any respect for its leadership. And these are the people that are dangerous. And so when you see things like this, and similarly, when you see like an entire surface battle group sail through those artificial islands that China claims as theirs and that has a 12 or 20 mile exclusion zone, when you do things like this, to the utter astonishment of people on the other side of the aisle, what you're really doing is you're going a long way to make sure that the world stays a peaceful place.
That's right. Because
you're making it clear. And it's got to be clear. You and I love history, Steve. There was one case, I cannot remember the case to save my life. It might have been World War I, but I'm not sure. But in any event, there was a story about a diplomat, and he was talking to he was talking as a representative of his own government to this foreign power. And he basically said, "Sir, I'm talking to the Kaiser, whoever it was. I don't remember the exact instance, but he said, I am not speaking to you now as a diplomat. I am telling you on my personal honor as a cavalry officer in His Majesty's whatever. It's like, I am telling you, I am giving you my personal word of honor that if you do this, then this will happen. There's not a diplomatic statement. I am giving you my personal word of honor." And I always remember being struck by that, by the power of that, you know. Yeah. And what that guy was doing was trying to add some certainty to the equation. And anytime you do something like this, you're not making the situation worse, you're making it better. You are adding certainty to the equation. It should be crystal clear to Vladimir Putin that we will send 6 B-52s or 60 or 600 or whatever we need to do to maintain the borders of our European allies.
And what a way to say it. Scott, next headline for you. KFC is pausing the use of its Finger-Lickin Good slogan on all its new adverts after 64 years because of the coronavirus crisis. Instead, the fried chicken chain will blur out and pixelate the well-known phrase. So it's just gonna say it's pixelated Pixelated Good. Now, whenever I see something pixelated,
Nation
Scott,
of children.
my brain goes straight to the gutter.
It's awfully pixelated good.
First of all, let me just note that Bill Whittle gets the B-52 question. I get the finger-licking good question.
Yes.
And I think that just says something right there about the as Vice President Biden would say, the mental capacity of the various candidates here. Number two, anything that you pixelate will, of course, increase interest. And the fact that they're blurring it out actually is more effective than if they printed it in crisp letters across the screen, 144 pixels high. And so that they're accomplishing exactly the opposite of what they pretend to accomplish. And then finally, and let this be said, licking one's own fingers is not the major problem. It's when you're licking someone else.
Precisely correct.
Yeah. That's a scene from a KFC that I don't need to see. All right.
I just have to say this. I've licked my fingers uncountable times, but I've never licked anybody else's fingers that I'm aware of. At least not, unless I bought him a drink first.
I was going to say, were you in some condition where you'd be unaware that you were licking someone's fingers?
It's
nation of children.
It's like the old expression, gentlemen. I'm sure you've heard this before. You can lick your fingers, you can lick your friends, but you can't lick your friends' fingers.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's right.
I'll have a bucket of that, please. Thank you.
All right. Bill, over to you. First night of GOP convention delivers nearly 6 times more views than the start of the Democrats' event on the C-SPAN live stream. Now, this was from the start. Not, oh, dear God, I've been watching this DNC funeral procession for an hour and I'm switching it off. This was initial interest. Can you glean anything out of that?
Well, you said 6 times what the Democrats got on opening night?
Yeah.
So that means there must be, I would imagine, probably 600 or 700 people tuned into the Republican
Nearly.
event. There are indicators. There are cultural indicators that I put a great deal of stock in. I don't put any stock in polls unless it's Rasmussen. And these things are things that I weigh with a great deal more weight than any of these other supposed, well, this is what's happening, that's what's happening. When you find out, for instance, that gun stores are out of guns because liberals have suddenly bought guns of people they've never seen before, not some guy who's coming in for his 8th gun. People are like, which end do I point at the bad guy kind of gun sales, right?
Oh, please get them to the range for training.
That's an indicator. It's an important indicator. All of these things are important indicators. But I've been saying forever that no one cares about Joe Biden, that the only appeal of Joe Biden is that people think he's most likely to beat Donald Trump. There's no enthusiasm for him, and there's no enthusiasm for Kamala Harris either. So when you tell me that 6 times as many people watched, was it night 2 of the Republican event as opposed to
it's night 1. We've only had one night of the RNC so far.
Okay, whatever. This is a year without conventions. Excuse me, it's a very strange year.
Yeah.
But this kind of metric is important. This kind of metric measures voter enthusiasm. And what the Democrats are very sadly lacking this year is voter enthusiasm. In 2016, you had Hillary Clinton, you had the first woman president thing, you had 2 terms of Obama and all. It's bad news for Joe. And he's been told about this many times, but he just doesn't seem to remember hearing it.
Indeed. Scott, we'll wrap with you. 23-year-old woman and 16-year-old girl charged in painting swastikas and anti-Semitic images on University Heights businesses in Ohio. The 23-year-old woman is Antifa. Does this surprise you?
She is the aunt of the 16-year-old? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Oh, not
she is,
anti, A-N-T-I.
Yes.
She's Antifa.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. Misunderstood there. No, well, she's just doing her job. As far as I can tell, that's what they do, and I don't see why that should raise any alarms. I do find it interesting that women have gone, rogue, anti-Semitic, vandalistic behavior. Normally, we associate that with young men. But it's good to see equality in this country. I think we've all cried out for a long time. It's, women probably are arrested and jailed maybe 69 times out of 100 compared to men for crimes like this. So this is good. This is a good sign, I think, for the future of the country and for women in general.
Indeed. I want to read you, there's a tweet from Byron York that was kind of cribbed from his own article in wherever he was writing, Washington Examiner. He says, are people desperate to get out of certain cities? He did the numbers. He called U-Haul and got prices for different trips. A U-Haul from Brooklyn to Chapel Hill, North Carolina costs $2,603. The other way, $492. How about Portland, Oregon to Boise? $1,242. But to rent that same van from Boise to Portland is $91. Quite the difference. And it's not the first time we've seen a story like this. I left San Francisco in 1994. And I rented a van from Ryder or Penske, I can't remember which. And it had to be a much bigger van than I actually needed because I'm moving out of this tiny little studio apartment. But I needed something big enough to tow my car behind. And it cost me about $1,200 to rent the van to get from San Francisco to Colorado Springs. And just out of curiosity, I asked the booking guy at the agency, what would it cost to rent that same van from Colorado Springs to San Francisco? And he informed me it was a little under $300. So 4 to 1 on the move expenses going from San Francisco, Colorado Springs, the other way around. Now, I was leaving San Francisco because I was tired of living in the liberal hellhole, which is so much nicer then than it is today. At least the sidewalks weren't covered in syringes and feces. And I told myself, landing in Colorado Springs, which is one of the most conservative cities in the country, that as soon as the springs started to fill up more and turn more leftward, that I would get out of Colorado Springs. And sure enough, that's how I ended up in Monument, Colorado, 14 years ago now. I got out just in the nick of time. And when Monument fills up and starts turning left, we're going to end up in Wyoming or Montana. And when those start to fill up and get too left wing, I don't know, Alaska, Mars, I don't know where to go next. But Elon Musk, I think my final retirement plan is counting on you and your rockets. So let's get busy, buddy. All right. And that is your Right Angle Lightning Round, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com, who insisted that this formerly members only segment be inflicted on the wider world. So if you have an issue with it, you got to take it up with them. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.